you were like, I'm overwhelmed, but overwhelmed with what?
I'm overwhelmed by life, not by things in particular. I'm very chameleon-esque. I never ran until I met you, and then you're like, I would like to run, and then I started running. I'm pretty easygoing in that way, but there is a downside to that, and one of those things is that I can basically find myself as a leaf in the wind of somebody else's life.
My request to you was like, it's actually really important for me as your partner that you be grounded. When I think about like my ideal day, some days like I'll do my morning routine, which includes going on a walk or a hike or a run, then meditating, and then being at my desk at 9 to work with a cup of coffee or like some hot water, and then getting like the 3 things that I need to do to move my business forward. And that happens, but that only happens sometimes, you know? But then you kind of like look at social media and you hear all these people who have like this amazing morning routine and you think they do it Monday through Sunday. 7 days a week. Mm-hmm. And so when you fall off, you're like, oh my God, am I lazy? Am I this? Am I this? And I'm just like, no, actually, part of life is like the intention is to do it most mornings, but you are not going to do it every morning. And I think I need to be kind to myself and know that, you know, like when I don't wake up at 6 and like do 6:30, whatever time I wake up and do that and just roll out of bed at 8 and like jump on my computer because something needs to be done. I don't have to be so harsh. Mm-hmm. To myself.
Right. And then allowing, I mean, if it's not working for you, it's important, I think, to shift it. But like, the defeats are really important in any hero's journey, you know, like, you know, whatever it is, you know, like, whether it's like the Lord of the Rings or something, right? It's like the defeat after defeat, you know, when they're, you know, heading to the mountain and they get, you know, they get caught in the spider webs, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, we're going to die. Like in that moment, somebody made a mistake. They got off the main road. They got captured. And now I think this is really bad. But that's actually a part of that journey. And going through several weeks of my life is not great. What's going on? Ups and downs. You know, all this stuff is actually thinking that's just part of that journey. And it's so easy to think that, oh, that's the bad stuff. But the good stuff is when I'm on my game and I'm getting up at, you know, at 6 or 6:30 and I'm meditating and I'm doing my morning ritual and I get to work. And by the time, you know, and 10 a.m. rolls around, I've got a body of work written or whatever.
I don't know. And also that includes like, I'm doing all this and excited about life.
Yeah.
You know, so there's like also that expectation that I get to be this human being who does all this thing and excited and eager to do it. You know, and sometimes like, no, I'm doing it and I'm hating every single minute of it. You know, sometimes I go on runs and I'm like, what the heck am I doing? Like, I don't want to be doing this. And sometimes I go on runs and I'm like, I'm really happy I'm running. But even sometimes I'm doing meditation and I'm just like, wait, I'm not meditating actually. I'm just thinking about all the things that I need to do.
But actually that's part of meditation, right? And that's not that that's a meditating, that's not, but to think that you can meditate and not have that even be happening most of the time is a bit of a misconception.
I know what you mean, but I just feel like sometimes when I'm doing all that, I feel like I should be enjoying it.
Right.
But I would say like I enjoyed like what 40% and I hate it. Not hated, maybe hate is I'm just don't like, I just feel like this is good for me, but I would rather not be doing this.
So let me ask you this. So I learned something several years ago that there are like I think it was 2 kinds of fun. If there's a third kind, I don't remember the third kind, but it's first degree fun, which is when you're out having drinks with your good friends and you're thinking, this is really fun. I'm having a lot of fun in the moment. And then there's second degree fun. Okay. And that's something that you do and it might be a challenge, but when you think back on it or you remember it, you're like, that was really fun.
I think most of my morning routine and most of the things that actually make that are really fun for me are like the second fun. Yeah. Where like in the moment, it's not fun. But when I think back to it, it's fun.
Right. So even like, because I hear a lot of times people say, oh, like, remember those times when we were in college and it was so fun? When you were in college, yeah, college is fun. But when you're in college, you're staying up, you're pulling all-nighters, cramming on a paper. You've got some professor who's being a jerk. You've got, if you're living in the dorms, you got to deal with roommates and other dorm mates, and God knows what's going on. And then you think back like, oh, those were the good old days. But really, if you go right back into the moment, you had some great times for sure. I'm sure of it, right?
But there was
a lot of stuff when you're in college that's not first degree fun.
No.
In fact, in the moment, you're like, this sucks. But then you look back and like, oh, that was actually really good times. And does that resonate?
It resonated when we were when we talked about like, what should we talk about today on the podcast? Part of like our commitment to starting this podcast was like, we are going to be vulnerable about what's actually happening in our lives. And if we're always looking back to what happened, then we look at it and it was like, it wasn't that bad. Mm-hmm. So our commitment is actually talk about what's really, really happening in this moment.
Right.
Because it's not kind of like looking back.
Well, when you look back on it, you can also pick and choose the stuff that you want. Whereas if you're dealing in the moment, it's like, no, sometimes in the moment it's really hard.
Yeah.
And it's not bad because it's hard. It just is.
Yeah. And so my question was like, I do want to be vulnerable I want to be honest and vulnerable in our podcast because that was our commitment. But then also like, I also don't want to be seen like as someone who complains about things too, because sometimes in the moment you can just be complaining and not really processing.
Yeah. So like, how was your morning? Oh, we had plans. We were going to record our podcast earlier. We got up and I meditated, and then we had to go have a meeting with the neighbor. And then that we thought would be 15 minutes, and it turned into an hour
3
and
hours.
a half or 2 hours. It was a long time.
It was a long time.
And then by that time we hadn't eaten breakfast yet. And it was already after lunchtime. So we were hungry and we did that. And by that, then we ate a lot and we got into a conversation with Mare who's visiting. And then we're like, oh, maybe let's take like a few minutes nap before we then come and do this. And then, oh, we have to do that. And now it's late afternoon. And this is basically the first thing that we've done for the day.
And we did our morning routine.
We did. But we could easily go back and basically, like, the day could be a success or a failure, depending on how we want to look at it. And, there's a part of me that I know when I look back at a day like today where I woke up this morning like I'm meditating, I'm getting back into my morning ritual that I haven't had in several weeks, and I'm going to do these things so I can get ahead of my day. And that just didn't happen.
No.
And if I went back, I could look at this day in two ways. I could look at it as a failure. I could look at it for just simply what it is. I don't know if I would call the day a success necessarily, but I probably should call the day a success.
I actually think the day was a success.
I'm alive.
Like not only did you survive, but I feel like the neighbor that we talked to, like you know him. Like since I've moved here, like I've just seen him and waved. And today we got to like really have like a conversation, like sit there and like get to know each other. And I feel like I know him, soulfully, like I know him. And to me, it's like, what's life about? Life is about listening to people's stories and like getting to know them at a deeper level. So to me, it was like, I feel like the day was a success, even though it took 3 hours.
Yeah. And even though at the end, right. And so I think that even as we're kind of talking about it and going through, that's actually a perfect example. I'm like, oh, I had all these plans and instead other things happened. And it's like, I can see that as like, is it a success? I don't know. And you're like, absolutely a success, which basically says we both had a day that was relatively similar, but yet for you, it was a success. And for me, it wasn't. And that now is like a perfect example of how I think all of these days or these challenges go. You get to look at it as great. Now I'm thinking, wait, am I kind of a jerk for not thinking that it was like better than it was? I actually had a really generally enjoyable day. So, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know how, like, however you're listening to this, to you, it can be like, seem like we're complaining. To others, it's just like, it's where we are at. And that was like, I just want to say like, that's what we wanted to keep like our podcast real.
Yeah.
And like where we are at as a couple and as two human beings that live together.
So I want to make a commitment right now because I'm going to put this on the air. I'm going to put it out there. At the beginning of the year, one of my goals for the year was each day before I get going, on particularly my work days, my Monday through Friday days, was to basically lay out a schedule for each day. Before I get going, sit down and it's like, how many hours am I going to spend writing? How many on email, business stuff, or whatever? And then stick to that.
Okay.
And it is already, we're in August, and I have done it on one day, And I didn't even stick to what I said I would do.
Really, one day?
One day I wrote it down. Maybe 1 week I did it most days or something, but I didn't. It just hasn't worked out.
Okay.
But as of today, like that is my commitment for the rest of this year.
You're gonna make a schedule?
That I'm really intentional with my day. Because if I could have been intentional with my day, I could have done one of two things. I could have at least gone back and seen, oh, you know what? This meeting I thought would take 15 minutes to a couple hours. Now I'm just going to adjust. And then that meeting going over isn't a problem. I bring what happened into my consciousness and I readjust my day rather than thinking, okay, well, now everything's messed up or whatever. Like that should be, the unexpected should be perfectly okay and good because I put the roadmap there. So then if I make a detour, the detour isn't a bad thing.
So are you going to do that when you wake up? Are you going to write it down when you wake up
when I get
or
up in
right
the morning,
before you
just
go
as
to bed?
When I sit down to start my day, what am I spending my time on?
Okay.
So that's what I'm going to commit to.
I'm not going to commit to that.
You don't need to. That's not your thing. And,
it's not my thing.
And feeling really good right now to be looking back and saying what happened and those challenges for the last few weeks happened. And now looking forward, knowing there'll be a lot more road bumps along the way. And that's totally cool.
Yeah. Okay.
So
we tomorrow we're going to wake up and do a morning routine.
We're going to do our morning routine tomorrow. And welcome to join us. If you're interested in what I do for my morning routine, or what each of us do, because they are a bit different, leave a comment or shoot us a message. Find us on social media, and we'll let you know what we do. And if you have a morning routine or some part of your routine that's really strong, share that with us. We'd love to know about it, and we'll talk about it on one of our upcoming shows. In the meantime, have a really good week, and thanks for joining us on It's Not All Black and White.
My name is Sarah. I'm black.
I'm Matthew. I'm white, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.